In the 1960s, I've mentioned a couple of things that began to happen in this nation that I think are extremely important. You know, we say God bless America all the time, and I do believe God blesses nations. The question becomes, why does God bless some nations? Why are some more blessed than others? And I believe if you study the scriptures, what you'll find is that God blesses nations that honor Him and acknowledge Him, and God blesses nations that try to keep His moral law, that base their civil law and their government policy on the eternal absolutes of God's moral law. If we want God's blessing in America, we're going to have to once again begin to honor and acknowledge God in the public square, to have free exercise of religion to do that. And we're going to have to return in our laws and our policy to acknowledging God's moral law. We're seeing the end results of where we went off the course 40 years ago, and let me just put it to you like this. Some people will say, well, your opinion on abortion is just your personal matter. It doesn't really matter in public policy. Well, tell that to the owners of Hobby Lobby. Because what you have now is a Christian employer being told, either you're going to provide a health care plan that includes abortifacients, chemical means of abortion, or you're going to have this huge fine. It's a direct assault upon religious liberty and freedom of conscience for the government to do this. Take the case of homosexual marriage, where it's now legal in a number of states. What's happening? Well, consider the wedding ceremony. If a pastor, or a Christian who happens to be a pastor is approached to officiate, he can still decline without risk of being sued. But what about a Christian who happens to be a photographer, or a baker, or a florist? If they decline to participate in a homosexual marriage, they open themselves up to a lawsuit based on discriminatory practices. And it's already happened. And people have already either lost a lawsuit, which is now, going through appeals process, or in some cases, people have simply closed their businesses down rather than try to deal with all of that. Again, what we're seeing there now is a direct assault upon religious liberty and freedom of conscience. And so that's where these issues that some people just consider to be personal morality and personal opinion, that's where these things end up at the end of the line. And people came here at the beginning of this nation for religious freedom, for religious conscience, and there's plenty of people who are simply not going to allow their liberty to be trampled upon like that, and that's part of what we're fighting.
It's interesting how much George Washington agreed with that perspective. I was just reading his Thanksgiving proclamation recently, and to him the most important thing was that the country obey the will of God in order that it continue to receive the blessings.
And we ought to take those things seriously. No one compelled him to say that. No one compelled him to put it in a statement to the entire nation or an inaugural address, and you'll find similar statements by other presidents, including Lincoln. They put these things in as intentionally, thoughtfully, and it simply reflects what we have received in our heritage going all the way back to the 1600s, but what has been under attack for at least 50 years, and perhaps going back as far as 100 years, on these foundational ideas and principles of the place of God in America. Do we want God's blessing in America? It's a question we have to answer. If we want God's blessing, then we have to meet the conditions for that. And I'm one of those who is hopeful for a great spiritual awakening. The first two great awakenings in this nation literally changed the course of history in America. Many people believe the first Great Awakening in the 1700s prepared the way for our independence revolution. The second Great Awakening certainly changed the course and the character of the United States. Now, what I would say about the second Great Awakening and encourage people to think about is this. There was one issue that our nation did not deal with. We did not deal with it in the Constitutional Convention in the way that it should have been dealt with. And even the Second Great Awakening couldn't solve the problem of slavery in this nation. And many people believe, and Lincoln made mention of this in his second inaugural address, and I think it's worth consideration, that the Civil War was perhaps God's judgment upon the nation, both the North and the South, for the national sin of slavery. Now, I believe we've put ourselves in the same situation with the slaughter of innocent unborn little boys and girls, each and every one created in the image of God. It's a national sin that is going to bring the judgment of God upon this nation if we do not repent and bring an end to the legalized killing of unborn babies.